Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan, and I'm absolutely honored to have the opportunity to talk with Warren Throckmorton, who is a psychology professor at Grove City College in north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a conservative Christian college. And Warren, I respect you a lot. You know a lot about social psychology. I want to do a public apology because I interviewed you for when I was researching the cult of Trump. And then when the book was finished, I was like, oh my God, I forgot to add Warren's comments. And so I apologize, but I very much respect you, and you're a good guy and very, very knowledgeable. And for me, you connect the dots with religion and science in a way that's very special. So with that as the intro, I would love to hear your thoughts about, we're now at June of 2021 and America is struggling. Take it away.
Well, thanks, Steve, and I appreciate you saying that. I really respect your work as well. I think you know that, and I use your work in my classes on social psychology. I expose the students to the BITE model, and we talk about mind control groups in the section on persuasion. There's the bright side of persuasion, and then there's the dark side of persuasion, and so we talk about both of those. And so,
yeah, and I just want to interrupt and say, Warren, since the last time we talked, I finished my doctoral work, and I actually did my dissertation on the whole issue of brainwashing and mind control and thought reform and undue influence, trafficking, and the law. And I did a quantitative study on the BITE model that came out with a very high factor analysis for control.
Nice.
So that was since the last time we chatted. So forgive me for the reference, but
no, that's super. Bravo to you. That's worthy of congratulations.
Thank you.
No, unless you've done one, it's hard to understand how freeing it is to get done with that. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah, I squeezed 7 years into 8 to get mine done.
Yeah.
So I can feel for you.
Yeah.
Well, where are we? I think we're in many ways we're in pretty good shape. We've seen the vaccine is what I see last night about in the mid 60s of adults have had at least one dose, and the competence of the administration to get that done in such a short time is refreshing.
You mean the 60 percentile, the 60% of adults have
adults
got.
Right. And so that, that's a good
thing.
So
is it fair to, can I interrupt you and just say, is it fair to say that you think that the vaccine is safe and important for people to take?
Oh, I do. My wife and I got it as soon as we could. We got on the call list at our local Rite Aid. We're not quite old enough to make the list in Pennsylvania of those who could get it, but they also had a list for people when somebody canceled or couldn't come or something like that. They call them at a moment's notice, and you show up.
That's great.
So we were on that list, and we got it that way. So
great.
And my son did the same thing, and my daughter's a therapist. One of my daughters is a therapist, and she did, and so it's something that we felt like, sure, we absolutely trust the science, and let's go. Let's do it.
So can I ask you to make a comment to Christians who may be in churches and their pastor is saying they should have faith and that this is a hoax and they don't need to take the vaccine? Is there any words you could share for if anyone's watching this?
Well, there's a lot of medical treatment that people take gladly. That's not a hoax.
Right.
This is all from uh, the same line of research and the same, conceptualization. And so I just think that,
Hmm.
the Bible told, Timothy was told to take a little wine for his stomach's sake. He's had a stomach ailment apparently of some sort, and he wasn't told to pray more, trust more, have more faith. He was told to, take some wine. I don't know what, exactly that did for him, but uh, if he'd had some Malox, I suppose at that time he would have said to do that. Uh,
So God
so
works through humans, is what I'm hearing you say. It's not against the Bible to trust science and doctors.
that's certainly my feeling, and I feel like that God gave us these gifts. He gave us our minds, and most of or many, not most, but many people who are working on this. I think of Francis Collins, for goodness sakes, NIH director, evangelical Christian.
Hmm.
Uh, he's at the forefront
Hmm.
of this work, and he certainly has no qualms about this. And I never have.
Hmm.
I never have seen any conflict between truth anywhere
Right.
and truth in the church. If God is the author of truth, and that's what Christians say they believe, then why wouldn't He be the author of truth everywhere? If we're
Right.
really that confident about it, then let's go. Let's be confident about it.
Great. I really appreciate you saying that. So let's go back to what the state of America is and the whole issue with faith in the government, faith in the media, the internet, the disinformation warfare. Please share some of your wisdom.
Well, we do have a crisis in a way of information. We have a group of people who get their information from a source that another group of people would never consult and don't know exist, really. I mean, when one group of people, the only source that they would consult is natural news or some such thing as that, uh, and that's they trust that uh, as their only source of maybe health information or medical information. How can we talk together if that is their source of truth? And I'm going to the medical journals and to my colleagues here at my Christian college who teach biology and chemistry and engineering, and I'm saying, what's the science tell me, you know, colleagues? And they're saying, here's what the science is, and I trust those people. And then, there's another group of people who they're trusting natural news, who's telling them all kinds of stuff that is just made up. And so we just have a problem when
Yep.
when we've got this, and I think of it as uh, just conflicting sources of knowing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to talk together when our sources of truth or sources of knowledge are so divergent.
Yep. So for me right now, the claim that Trump won the election by a landslide and that Russia had no involvement with the Trump administration or his election, to me, those
Uh,
are two big lies that some politicians are repeating. Fox News, Breitbart, Alex Jones, and they're trying. And General Flynn is trying to stir up like a armed insurrection to folks who really believe that they're the patriots and that everyone who's opposed to Trump is a communist or a socialist or something, which is there's no factual basis for whatsoever. I know I'm not
Yeah.
a communist or a socialist, like 0%.
Well, we used to have a system. Uh, I mean, we still do theoretically, and on paper, but a system where we had an election, we had a winner and we had a loser, and as bitter as it might be, the losing side accepted it, and you went on, and then you tried really hard to reverse it the next time, but you accepted it.
Right.
We just haven't had that. It violates all the norms.
Right.
And I did this reminds me, your question reminds me that in my social psychology class, I did an assignment for my students this semester about
Mm-hmm.
the Trump prophecies. I went back to Leon Festinger's book, When Prophecy Fails, and I had them read a chapter of that book. And if you know that book, there's he infiltrated a mind control group that believed, various things that
UFO cult,
UFO
Marion
cult. There you go.
Keach.
That's it.
Yeah.
And the thing that he wanted to know was what would happen when the prophecy failed, when it was disconfirmed. And of course, it was disconfirmed. The
Because the
aliens,
spaceship didn't land on the mountaintop when the leader prophesied it would.
exactly, oddly enough. And so when it was disconfirmed, you would think that, and the prediction, I mean, he didn't actually predict this, but many people would think, oh, well, then they'll just give up their belief. That's not what they did. They actually tried to bring more people into the group, and they proselytized more. And so what he found was that proselytization, trying to bring more people into the group, was the response, at least through, and I don't recall how many disconfirmations, but more than one, more than a couple.
Yeah.
Eventually, the cult died out, and he also had some other examples from religious history
Mm-hmm.
of disconfirmations of Christ coming back, predictions that he would come back, and he didn't come back. And so I had my class read this sections of this book, and I compared it to all of the ministers who prophesied that Trump undoubtedly was going to win,
Mm-hmm.
and the QAnon prophecies that Trump was going to win. So what happened after he didn't win? Well, we saw what happened. There were a number of different reactions. There was proselytization. There were people who were, saying, come join us. We need more patriots. We need to take our country back. Then there were other reactions too to these failed prophecies. He really didn't lose.
Mm.
He's going to come back on Inauguration Day.
Right.
All those troops that were in DC, they weren't there to protect the inauguration. They were there to arrest all the Democrats
Mm-hmm.
and bring Trump triumphantly back. Well, when that didn't happen, then what? And so there was all of these, puntings when the disconfirmation didn't happen, or when it was disconfirmed.
Yeah.
What's the response? And so I had my class look at, QAnon postings, and they looked at Gab and Parler postings to try to see what do people do in the face of cognitive dissonance. And I think we're still in that period. I think
Yep.
we're still in a period where some people are saying, boy, okay, I was wrong. But there are still others who are saying, okay, now what? Trump, what now? And I even saw just this week something about August.
Yep. So it's been a fascinating 5 years. The last year, I've been spending a lot of time analyzing QAnon and trying to understand it. And I actually categorized it as an authoritarian cult and not just a conspiracy theory. I believe it's much more organized than that, much more. It is a network, but it's very top down and with specific goals in terms of recruitment and indoctrination. But yeah, I used the bite model was based on Festinger's, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Do an extreme behavior. We tend to rationalize it to compensate because we like to be consistent. So I added information control, and that's what formed the bite model understanding. But that said, people can exit these closed systems, but it depends on quality connections with the outside world, with non-believers, people from their families, from their churches, from their childhoods, and also being able to go back in time before they became a believer in, Trump, for example, and like, what did they originally think of Trump? Was it a positive or a negative? And engage them in an understanding that they were systematically influenced into this rabbit hole that is self-reinforcing or self-sealing. But deep down inside, I don't think people like to be lied to or exploited or abused, or, if their life quality is going down or their pastor is dying of COVID, even though he prophesied that it's a hoax. Eventually, people start realizing, this isn't working. And so I'm in the I got out movement, the hashtag I got out. I'm not stupid. I did get deceived. I did get influenced, but now I'm back home in my body and my mind, deciding what I want to do with my life and what I believe God wants me to do with my life. So in that sense, it's good. Do you have any advice that you might have if someone from the administration is listening, or if people who, want to overthrow the administration is listening? And any advice to them on how to figure out what's real?
Well, don't do it if you're thinking of overthrowing anything. Just don't do it. No.
Yeah, people are arrested for the insurrection attempt, and they're facing jail time.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
The Oath Keepers is one of those groups that started out as a kind of, I guess I'll just say this. Let me back up a little bit. I ran into it first researching David Barton.
Tell us who David Barton is.
Well, he's a self-described historian who has no historical training, but he is a proponent of Christian nationalism. The belief that the church and state separation really is not a real thing, that the government should be able to inculcate Christian principles and legislate according to Christian principles. And he's been doing this for actually 2 or 3 decades. And so the Oath Keepers have used some of his materials, and that's how I ran into them, was through researching and responding to him. And they started out really as a group wanting to just simply promote that idea. But you see where they ended up.
But the Oath Keepers, they're also mostly vets, aren't they? Aren't they military folks?
Perhaps. I lost track of them. I just was actually a little surprised when January 6th came along and that all came up, because I had lost track of them when I first started to first read about them and first started to kind of listen to some of their things and read some of their things, because They just seemed to be another group that David Barton was influencing.
Uh-huh.
David Barton, who would not really ever come out and say, let's go have an insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
That's not his style. But one of the people arrested was a student of David Barton's
Hmm.
and talked about being a student of his and that we need to take our country back, bring it back to God.
Mm-hmm.
An odd way to do that, right? To storm the Capitol. And
But
so here you have this group that, again, because I'm not paying any attention to it, but in these years have become militant
yeah,
and now are really at the center of these arrests.
yeah.
And again, where did it start for them? It started with this idea that the government must be according to my religion.
Yeah.
And not just my like broad Christianity, but my version of it. And
Which is anti-biblical as I understand it, because Jesus, if I'm understanding his words, when he says, my kingdom is not of this world, or render unto Caesar what Caesar's, he wasn't saying take over the government and make laws to make everybody obedient to us.
well, and the framers, that's basically what, you'll read Madison. Madison says, if our religion needs government, it isn't much of a religion. So it's not Christian and it's not American, because that's not what the Constitution is about, is establishing a particular religion. In fact, the framers said very specifically, that's not what we're doing here. We're not establishing a religion. We're not going to do that.
Right.
That happened all through Europe, and we did that. We tried that. We're not going to do that here. And, nobody's going to raise a sword to raise a cross.
Right. So the Christian nationalism and dominionism, can you define, is there any difference? Because I've heard of Seven Mountain dominionism. Can you say a little bit more for our listeners?
Well, Christian nationalism is a conceptual, I think it's more conceptual in the sense that the belief is the government and our country is founded on Christian principles, and therefore our laws should reflect those. Dominionism is more of a statement about who should run things. It takes it just a little further.
So it's worse in that sense.
I think so. I think that it is implied by Christian nationalism, but you could be a Christian sitting in any evangelical church and believe, the founders wanted us to be a Christian nation.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you say, well, and by golly, we need to take this country back, get your gun. And that same person would be horrified.
Mm-hmm.
Say, no, that's not, no. We vote for Christian candidates. We vote for people who uphold our morals, who uphold our policies. But no, I'm not going to go storm the Capitol. I'm not going to try to, get my guy in, even if I think that he was cheated out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the dominionists, and there are some dominionists, many dominionists actually, who would never want to storm the Capitol either.
Mm.
But there is a group of them who I think would be in that Oath Keepers kind of world that would say, well, the next logical idea is, if we're supposed to be in charge, let's just go be in charge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was taken from us. Let's take it back.
Yeah, and as a former member of a cult, the Moonies, where in 1974 I was told to fast for Nixon during Watergate, and fasted for 3 days because Moon said God wanted Nixon to be president, so laws be damned, God is in charge. mean, I literally was taught that democracy was satanic and that this was a war. World War III was between God and Satan. And in retrospect, Satan was a lot more powerful than God, so that we were always working out of fear and needing to combat the opponent instead of operate out of faith and love and strength that we're doing righteous things and good things.
Mm-hmm.
It was flipped on its side. Um, so can I push you a little bit more and ask you to talk about a collection, kind of a new development in Christianity called New Apostolic Reformation? And these are the folks that say, I'm an apostle or I'm a prophet. I speak directly to God. I get direct revelations and I can speak in tongues, cast out demons, do faith healing, and I can run all of your lives and tell you what God wants for you to do, including sleep less, give all your money. Any comments you can add?
Well, I think you made a good start there.
Well, I wrote about it in The Cult of Trump. I had to research it because it was new to me.
Right. This takes the Christianity out of the sort of the denominational world, the mainstream. I mean, mainstream Christianity has been losing members and losing ground in Christendom for quite a while. And many of the independent churches are in the orbit of what you call the New Apostolic Reformation. These are, as you say, individuals who believe they have apostolic gifts, the sign gifts, some would call it, of speaking in tongues, of healing. And they also believe they have and should have the authority to bring the religious realm into every other realm of society, including political.
Yeah.
Now, again, you do have a difference of opinion among them about how much force should be used to get that accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
There are many individuals who really just want to use the political process and are quite fine with that. But yet you do have those who, and it was accentuated, I think, by the election this year with those who came to believe, whether they really believed it, I still have a hard time believing that some of them actually truly believed that millions of people conspired to steal the election. But even if they really believed it, that because it was stolen, that God gave some authority to take it back, counter to the constitutional processes that are in place. That they felt like that it would be God's work or God's will in some way for the legislatures of these various states to hold hearings, to pass laws trying to take away the votes of hundreds of thousands of people, for courts to rule that throw out the election. It was an unfair election, give the election to Trump. And that somehow that would be godly to do that. There was a collection of Christians who were praying for that. And I would say that they would be in that camp that you were just talking about, that God would do a miracle and install his man. I kind of choke on saying that, his man in power.
Yeah.
Because he was promised 2 terms. He was prophesied that he would have, 2 terms. And the apostolic believers, believe very strongly in that prophecy.
Yeah, you just made a point that I hadn't connected the dots with about biblical, so-called prophecy of some of these folks that say that God speaks to them. I believe there was a whole book written of prophecies about Trump, even before the 2016 election. There was a number of people saying that they heard from God and this is what God's will is.
Oh, I don't know that book, but I'm not surprised. The I think it was some 40 prophets were absolutely convinced that Donald Trump was going to have two terms.
Yeah,
And
so-called
so,
prophets.
right. And so when he didn't win, this was one of the bases, this was a basis for saying it must have been stolen.
This
God
is
had prayed.
this is very fascinating to me. This is a new thought, a different angle that I hadn't considered, that they were doubling down to make sure their prophecies, were real, and it was just man that messed it up. God had a
Right.
different plan, Almighty God. That's so interesting. But I think for a lot of people, especially people who are not religious at this point in their life, they look at Trump and his misogyny, his racism, his fraudulent history, all of his bankruptcies, on and on and on, going, how can anyone think God is using this man? And I remember again from researching the cult of Trump that they were saying, oh, he's like a King Cyrus figure, like he's
Mhm.
flawed, but God's going to use him, like, in the Bible. What do you think?
Well, that is the the key part of the prophecy is that he's not. It's not him. It's the policies he's implementing,
Mm-hmm.
and God is working through him to do
Mm-hmm.
those things. A flawed vessel
Mm-hmm.
to do His work, and I think that the character issues. I mean, they used to matter when they were Democratic candidates or presidents or any other
Right.
office. Character issues, mattered a whole lot, but all of a sudden they didn't matter for Donald Trump. It was just the policies that they felt were needed in place, and that would be enough.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, God had told them that he was to be elected for 2 terms to do his will, and that settled it. So when he didn't win, that sinked it. It had to be stolen.
Right.
Because in their way of looking at things, the devil is powerful enough that he can eke one out now and then.
Yeah, like the Moonies. Like, yeah, Satan's really powerful. We
Yeah,
have to.
yeah.
Right.
And so you just have to work and pray and maybe sometimes take up the sword.
Mm. Yeah, so my former cult has a new splinter group because Mrs. Moon has taken over the main cult, and two of her sons are on breakaway, and one of them has what's called the Rod of Iron Ministry, and
Hmm.
he says that the AR-15 has been prophesied in the Bible as the rod of iron.
Hmm.
So he's saying we all need assault rifles for God. And
Is he selling them?
yeah, they have a
Well,
gun factory
of
in
course.
Pennsylvania, in fact. But he's now moving to Texas where they're trying to get rid of all gun restrictions.
That's the place to be if you're going to sell some guns.
Yeah, the Moonies own car arms, but they have a whole manufacturing business to make assault rifles. So they want to kind of stoke fear of a civil war because you need to get your guns.
Mm.
to protect yourself. It's so sad.
Hmm. Is that
So
Sean?
yeah, Sean Moon has the
Sean.
Rod of Iron Ministry, and Justin Moon has Car Arms and the gun manufacturing company.
Okay.
But he prefers not to be in the media. But Sean was actually at the January 6th insurrection, uh,
Okay.
tweeting out how it was Antifa that was doing all of the
Oh,
bad stuff.
yeah. Of
And the
course it was.
Mooney's paper, the Washington Times, was similarly saying, disinformation, that it
Yeah.
was Trump followers, even though the flags were Trump, all the clothing said Trump, but it was really Antifa dressed up as Trumpsters, apparently. That's what they claimed. But it's
So
pretty
was it Mrs. Moon that had the event with Mike Pence and Pompeo?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. May 8th, there was a 3-hour virtual conference, apparently, with one of their front groups, and Pence and Pompeo and Newt Gingrich, I
Ah, okay.
believe,
Okay.
was there, and a bunch of other celebrity individuals. Want to comment on that one?
Well, I'm not surprised. Mrs. Moon has been pretty successful in getting high-profile Christians to appear with her, uh, even though she has not been shy about declaring the Christian era over. She gets these Christian, uh, you know, big names
Well, they claim
to
to be Christians, yes.
to appear with her and dignify uh, the church, the Unification Church. It's pretty amazing, really. I don't know if Pence was looking for political donations or I mean, both of them want to run for president, Pompeo and Pence.
But my knowing what I know of the Moonies, there are two primary ways of recruiting high profile people for events like this. One is just to offer them a lot of money to show up for an hour,
Hmm,
or buy a certain number of their books, guaranteed, so the money gets to them indirectly.
okay.
Another technique they like to do is to offer to give them an award and then drop the names of other people they think they
Hmm,
like, and say they're going to be there because they want to roast you, but they haven't asked the other people yet. They just are like, we want to give you an award, Dr. Throckmorton, and we'll give you an honorarium to show up. And then they call. So Dr. Throckmorton's going to get this award, and it would be so great to support him because we know that you like his work and support him. Da, da, da. So they do those manipulations, and they take the photos, shaking hands, smiling, and all of that. And obviously they don't in the invitation say, by the way, Christianity's dead. We're taking over. That's a different messaging. And that's where the whole information control point of view is so critical in understanding the difference between an ethical organization or an unethical one. Because the ethical ones give you informed consent. They tell you who they are, what they believe, and what they want from you before they ask for a commitment. And all the bad groups lie. They distort, they withhold information that's vital. And it's all about telling you what they think is going to work on you, but not the whole picture of what they're really about and what they want from you. It's very concerning. The way it's looking to me is there's a global movement towards pushing countries towards authoritarianism, which is now in the media being called popularism, but it's really authoritarianism and anti-democratic, anti-human rights stuff, versus those of us who still believe in human rights and freedom of religion and separation of church and state and and democracy, to, as flawed as it is, a separation of powers in order to put the public good at the fore and not personal ambition and greed.
Hmm. What do you think Mrs. Moon's end game is with this? Still courting the Republican right. Is she looking
So
for a
I
place of prominence?
So I have a very biased view because I was in the leadership meetings with her husband. I mean, she did shopping. Like it was a
Yeah,
very male-dominated
right.
cult.
Yeah,
We were the men were subjects, women were objects that
yeah.
reflected beauty, but we made all the decisions. So to see her as the main figurehead is odd, but what I came to learn, Warren, and this was years after my deprogramming and after a House subcommittee investigation into Korean CIA activities in the US, I read that investigation, all of the interviews under testimony. And the founder of the Korean CIA said that he, quote, organized and utilized the Unification Church as used for a political tool, unquote. And what I came to understand was that the Moonies were a tiny little cult in Korea, one of many. Moon himself had been in a cult where he stole a lot of the ideology. But it was really governments and intelligence services going, well, North Korea is brainwashing people, and South Korea is very unstable as a government. They've had 2 coups. We need to institute a Korean CIA, and we need to develop a program for dissidents to correct their thinking. And they used the proxy group, the Moonies, to create a front group, Victory Over Communism, to get people thinking properly. And it was only when America was leaving Vietnam War that some of these same folks that set up the Moonies said, let's bring them to the US and put them on campuses to fight the communists on campuses. And that's when I got recruited in February of 74. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I don't believe Mrs. Moon is running this operation.
Okay.
I think there are people that have been manipulating the group for decades for power, money, sexuality, whatever. And that's what, even as a member, I was like, why are we giving money to Jerry Falwell? Like he's like a fallen prophet.
Right.
You know, Jesus failed his mission. Why are we helping them out? And it didn't quite make sense until I had the larger view, which is that there's this anti-communist authoritarian movement that we have to, institute because people want power and money and control of governments. And so that's the bigger picture as I see it are a collection of different cult groups, authoritarian cults, whether they're white supremacists or extremists, Jewish extremists, Christian extremists, Muslim extremists, against the rest of us who are like, we just want to live and survive and take care of our kids and save our planet for future generations. So that's how it's looking to me. Is there are larger forces at play here that need to be outed, and the public needs to be taught what you teach for a living, social psychology. People need to understand how human beings are so able to be influenced by authority figures, by peer groups they identify with, by the roles and structures. So we need more social psychologists, in my opinion, to be active teaching the public, hey, people, like, let's understand how the mind is wired and what our flaws are in our wiring and how we can correct, these distortions and biases.
Well, and asking questions like, why is Mike Pence and Pompeo talking to the Unification Church? and I don't care. You can talk to anyone you want to. It's a free country. We just talked about freedom. I don't personally care,
Right.
but if you're going to say that you are a champion of evangelical Christianity and you're the lion and you're going to lead us to whatever victory, why are you talking to a group that says that whole religion is dead? That's
And Jesus
over.
failed his
He
mission.
failed his mission. Why isn't anybody in the evangelical world asking about that? Why is that not on in the Christian Post, Christianity Today? Why isn't anybody writing about that? I mean, Mother Jones wrote about that. David
Yep.
Korn wrote that article. I'm
Yep.
going to post on my blog, but 3 people will read it. So
Well,
what's
that's why I'm
going on?
interviewing you. We want to get more people to read your blog and know your work.
All right, let's go.
That's why I asked you to speak, because we really need more grounded religious scientists to, say hello, let's
Yeah.
learn together for our future children and grandchildren and great grandchildren's sake.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It may be that Mike Pence has another agenda besides the church. I mean, maybe there's some other thing he's got in mind.
Well, what I didn't understand was that there was this cult called the Family that was formed after, I guess, World War II-ish, that was all about power, and they would recruit Republicans and Democrats. Jeffrey Charlotte wrote 2 New York Times best-selling books. There was a Netflix series on the Family. Mike Pence was recruited into the Family by Chuck Colson, who was one of the Watergate plumbers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at one of their prayer breakfasts that my former cult leader, Moon, was immediately brought to the White House to meet with Nixon. And that led to the fasting and support for Nixon, to see if the group could change the media perspective that Richard Nixon was a crook and anti-democratic. So, in
Nothing
other words, I
political.
do think Pence has other, cult affiliations that are very concerning.
Yeah, nothing political about that. That's just all religion right there.
Yeah, very, very disturbing. So, as we're wrapping up, can I just do some quick rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Like I emailed you, hey, what do you think of Ravi Zacharias? It was in the context of hearing that Pence went to his memorial. He died of cancer in 2020. But also hearing that many women claim to have been hurt and molested by Ravi Zacharias, who was considered one of the biggest names in Christian apologetics.
Yeah, that's a big shock to many. I think the report I read does ring true. I know
There was a report done by a law firm interviewing a lot of the former employees and victims, right?
Yes, that's right. And I had done some reporting on that prior to that report coming out, and there was a lot I couldn't report that I had known before, and the report that the lawyers came out with confirmed all of that. And so it's just a tragic situation there. And obviously, he had, again, many very powerful and famous people fooled.
Yeah, he was making tens of millions of dollars a year for his entities, claiming
Right.
and helping trafficking victims and such, and yet he was harming women.
I really can't add anything to that. It was just the hypocrisy is weapons grade. It's off the chart.
Yeah, it's terrible. And Any other last thoughts as we wrap up on thoughts, recommendations, any blogs you've written that you think we should link to in this as we prepare a written thing to go along with this video that you think our viewers
Well,
would be interested in?
recently I've been following a church in Phoenix, the Trinity Church. This is a church pastored by Mark Driscoll,
Hmm.
once with Mars Hill Church in Seattle. He was disqualified from ministry there because of his authoritarian, controlling leadership style. Well, he's kind of at it again.
Mm.
I've started a series called Postcards from Phoenix, where former members and staff are writing me, telling me about their experiences in the church with pastoral control. And I've rarely seen anything like this in an Orthodox church, fairly Orthodox theology. They're not really off the wall as far as the theology goes for an evangelical church, but uh, basically telling people who they can have as friends, telling people that if they have certain friends, they're down the scale of trust with the leader, that they won't be able to be friends with pastors if they have other members or former members as friends. I mean, this is right out of your behavior control, the B in the bite model. I just you rarely see this in churches. I can't imagine a pastor telling me, if you want to be friends with me, you can't talk to this other person over here. And anyway, I've been following that, and more stories are coming out, so that's what I've been following lately.
Yeah, and I want to just mention, you just brought up a point that I want to expand, and just that people can believe Orthodox theology and still be in an authoritarian cult that is undermining their own ability to think for themselves, have a direct relationship with God, have a conscience, and act on their conscience. A group that I worked with for many, many years that was started here, the Boston Church of Christ, was an offshoot of the Crossroads movement, and was basically, as far as I understand it, pretty theologically sound, except they took, the authority thing to another level that is not in scripture, and a lot of legalisms of these. You can't wear your hair a certain length, or you can't have a beard, or you can't have a beard, and you need to check with who you can go on a date with, and just a huge amount of intrusion into people's free will and choice. They also had a
Yes.
very formulaic way of teaching the Bible, where people had to, and they were fast tracked to get baptized, to get through the 6 or 10, lessons, count the cost, and then, be dunked, and then dunked again and again and again if they have sin, because they obviously didn't get it right the first time.
Okay.
As if they were going to be sinless.
Yeah, right.
Baptized. Yeah. Anyway, Warren Throckmorton, Dr. Throckmorton, thank you so much. And let's stay in touch, and continued success.
All right. Thank you. Same to you, Steve.